So I'm going to read a few poems from Siren, which is my latest pamphlet. And it's themed around the idea of the siren, which we often think of as a kind of mermaid mythological figure. But originally in the Odyssey, a siren was actually half bird, half woman, not half fish, half woman. So it's sort of looking at the hybrid woman in kind of all different aspects. And the first poem is very much influenced by Adrian Rich's amazing Diving into the Wreck, and it's called Mermaid Visits the Archive, after Adrian Rich. By the shore she recalls once diving the wreck, though they told her never to adventure its depth, or harvest its bones cast as oracle on ocean floor. She witnessed the rotten hull give way, from tarry gloom a dull gleam of mercury, copper ingots cold clink. She longs to recall the stink of death, no documents but papered dissolution. She seeks herself in ivory and iron, salt-cured skins, elephant tusks, stone-shot fragments of pelvis. Later she learns to hide her tail beneath long skirts. Land dweller, she gathers a form from museum dust. Between mammoth and manatee, she reads of an affinity with elephants. Her twin pairs of breasts howl when strapped to a mast. She gains ecstasies, a voice pitched to scream, which some sailors call her song. She feels the stones weighting her chest. Ghosts of coins spill silver from her mouth. So the book has a sort of loose sequence, I suppose, where we have Mermaid starts off visiting the archives. She becomes merwife in one of the poems. Then as merwife, she dreams about running away to the circus. And then finally, she abandons the suburbs, which is the next prose poem I'm going to read. It's called Merwife Abandons the Suburbs. The day she leaves home, every car alarm on the street rings with a siren simultaneity. What are they telling her? Only water knows, moving within her, an oceanic feeling of intuition or warning. She walks to the bus stop, past kids calling and shoving in a confusion of hormones. We've explored just 5% of the ocean floor, says a girl. There's 95% we know nothing about. The winter sky is clear and sharp as an inhalation, a pale yellow slant of shoreline. Once she shucked off her armour to assimilate. Now she prepares to harden, turn calloused, chitinous. At first it hurts, but the water is icily numbing, anaesthetic. Her skin scrapes rocky shallows, the soles of her feet, ribboned by shards, branch in coral fronds of blood. She sinks deeper, stones cupped in each clenched fist freighting her downwards. Her scales begin to glint forth, tiny slivers of teeth seaming both her calves. Silvering is an adaptation, a camouflage mirroring the sea's luminosity. Soon she'll become invisible. So the next poem also plays on this idea of the hybrid woman, I guess, and the kind of monstrosity of hybridity and the monstrous feminine, you know, harpies, the Medusa, and so on. And it's a found poem. The text is from actually an academic paper by, I think his name is Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, the notes in the book anyway, and it's a paper called Monster Culture, 7 Theses. And it's basically about how cultures produce the monsters that they desire, almost. And so my poem is called On the Female Monster, and it's also in 7 parts. On the Female Monster. 1. The monster's body is a cultural hybrid, defying annexation with green vapour and polyphony. Vitality stalks her imperiled hair, both warning and portent. She wreaks desire and feminine upheaval. 2. The monster always escapes, with her freakish propensity to shift and vanish, like bones or geographic talisman. She fragments aberration with her dangerous refusal, bifurcating, and/or, either/or. 3. The monster is the harbinger. We are violated in the cyber resistance of the monster's body, which devours hypermasculine human history. 4. The monster dwells at the gates, the undead ocean returned to live among us. A dispossessed hydra, the planet in pain, incorporated as a haunting. 5. The monster polices the borders of grotesque prohibition. 2 living bodies engulfed and bound. Virago, Lilith, Sycorax, she and them. 6. Fear of the monster is really desire. Every sublime glimpse casts a sculpted dance, lascivious imaginary, exoticized beauty, disturbing rape. 7. The monster stands at the threshold, asks us why, asks us what is sanctioned, what is forbidden. So the next poem sort of, again, deals with archives, histories, and I guess it kind of also has a theme of eco-mourning, really. And it was actually inspired by a thing I did in my Medical Humanities, where we looked at some of the human remains that are kept actually in museums quite close to here. And these were kind of collected in the colonial era, sort of skulls from different populations around the world, in the kind of era where people thought that you know, this was a thing. And then obviously now nobody knows what to do with them, and some of the provenance has been completely lost. So although some of these people, for example, people of the kind of Pacifica region have asked for the remains back, they actually, it's all such a mess that they don't know what to do with it. So this is linking that to the fact that I guess scientists often are looking at things that are in the past and don't really know how that represents what they're looking for. It's called Auguries. When the birds were dead, we gathered up their small and scattered heads. We fired them clean of charred flesh and feather. We scoured them to yellow bone. Bleached skulls lined our long wooden tables like cups. In leather aprons we took their measures. Hollow of bone, lacunae of air, angle of bill, gleam of eye. How breakable they seemed. We blasted them in floods of radiant atoms, summoned up their voice with whistle and pipe. Nothing, no song but quiet. Abandoned rows of hollowed heads furred with dust. One by one, they shattered. Their bones flinched beneath our souls. We heard fluted notes, a sonation of winging ghosts brushed our faces as they rose. We were blameless, no lie. How should we know what futures those skulls of birds foretold, our ears too old to hear their singing? So the next poem I'm going to read is a ghazal, and I'll just, I'm sure the poets in the audience know this already, but just to introduce the form. So it's a form that came via Arabic and Persian to Urdu and Hindi, and it's a very common form for poetry to be written in on the Indian subcontinent now, and it's a form which is in couplets, and the couplets tend to have both a repeated word, a refrain, and also a penultimate rhymed word at the end of the second line of each couplet. The ghazal is inspired by the dream diary of Tipu Sultan. Tipu Sultan was an 18th century ruler in India, and when he was defeated by the British at the siege, and in fact killed at the siege of Seringapatam, a lot of the artifacts and jewels from the kingdom came over to Britain and were really quite fashionable with kind of the gentry to collect at that time. And one of the most famous ones, I think, is it's called Tipu's Tiger, and you can see it in the V&A Museum. And it's this kind of wooden automaton of a tiger mauling a British soldier. And they don't actually, I think it doesn't work anymore, they haven't repaired it, but at the time you would turn a handle and it would kind of go, "Rawr," and you'd hear the cries of the British soldier when it did this. But among all these artefacts, another artefact that we possess actually in the British Library, not very far away from here, is the dream diary of Tipu Sultan. And he would record all his dreams in this dream diary and then give them to his kind of priests, his wise men, his seers, and ask them to interpret them so that he knew what would befall the kingdom. And in fact, all the imagery in this is taken from the dream diary of Tipu Sultan, which you can read at the British Library. So it's called Ghazal Air. Dark shell, white flesh, milk of coconut spills in the air. We fly these ruins as birds, our losses wing the air. Powder white as the elephant an emperor once sent. Smoke rises from funeral pyres to sting the air. Clothed in yellow silk, under a rain of jasmine blooms, temple idols weep, their eloquent hands hymn the air. Did we dream of leaving our city as strangers? Nephilimancy clouds danger, thunder gins the air. Their hunters steal sly victory, hack at gathered bones. Our tigers scull bullets, stripes thicken and skin the air. We wander in labyrinths, gather our songs in threadbare palms. As the moth forsakes stars, we embrace the flame, pin the air. So I'm just going to finish with two more quick poems. They're quite short. And these are not collected in any book at the moment. But this one came out quite recently in Poetry Wales magazine. And again, I should give a little bit of context. It's called The Goddess of English is Abroad. And it's inspired by this Dalit activist who trying to promote the use of English among his people, because with the kind of hegemonic sort of rise of Hindi with the current government, his viewpoint was that actually if people in a small village in India want to get ahead, they need to learn English because it's global language and tied to economic success. So he actually installed a kind of brass statue of an Englishwoman in a long dress with a kind of big hat, like a sort of Edwardian picture in the temple in his local village. So it's a run-on title, so I'll just start. The Goddess of English is abroad, sporting her wide-brimmed hat, ivory skin scrimshawed in lines, ears attuned to Kipling and Lear. Under her veined lids of china blue, she lists, heat dulled, skull sugar silted, tea conspiracy laced. For half a brass farthing, she'd flog up the old shop's tiger skin rugs, found peacock feathers, crocodile handbags, clasped to her bosom the maw of empire's capaciousness, grasp the audacity of a mendicant pose, squat down Indian style. And the very last poem I'm going to read was published in Rialto, I think a year or two ago. And again, just to give some context to the title, it's called Black Star. And it's called Black Star because there was a kind of free magazine that an anti-racist movement in Bradford, who were called Kala Thara, which means Black Star, used to publish, and the magazine was also called Kala Thara. And although the organisation and the magazine are now defunct, I kind of wanted to link it to the sort of long history of collective resistance. So it's called Black Star. Hail to the Lascars, arise, Ayers, frail ghosts at the feast, their feet the first to alight, to trek from fort to forest, first to irk the khakis, kilts and rifles, to forget the life of Kurt's key, railgurry, leather's lash, ashes, graft and heat. Here's to heresies that risk the ire of oafish orators or fists of shifty foes. Reify those heroes, erase their griefs, their sighs. Let freaks gather, fakir, griot, artist, fighter. Let rioters shatter the ghetto gates. Sorry. Let their hearts soar to astral rays. Let starlight heal the rift. Let stake the right to shake earth free of hate's fetters. Hail to the isles others. Lay a rose at the altar of their fate. Thank you very much.